Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, as the case might be, and welcome to this third webinar in our Sharing Data Made Easy series. So I am thrilled to be hosting this webinar with our partners at GivingData and with one of our e-reporters, the Conrad Hilton Foundation, and really happy that so many of you decided to join us today. So just to introduce myself, my name is Laia Greeno, and I'm Director of Data Discovery at Foundation Center. And in that capacity, I oversee our e-reporting program, which I'll be telling you about more in just a moment. But just in case people are not familiar with Foundation Center, just wanted to mention that we're a nonprofit organization that since the 1950s has been making data about philanthropy available for use by the social sector and others. And while historically we've focused on grant making mostly by US foundations, in recent years we've been expanding that to try to capture more data about global philanthropy and also new types of philanthropy that are emerging. Joining me today is Michelle Humphreys, Senior Manager of Engagements at GivingData, and Allison Gister, who's Director of Grants and Knowledge Management at the Hilton Foundation, and who I've gotten the pleasure to know better as a result of preparing for this webinar. So let me tell you a bit more about our agenda for today. I'll start with a quick overview about e-reporting, and based on the registration, I realize that we have a mix of e-reporters and non-e-reporters, so hopefully this will be a helpful introduction or refresher to everyone. I'll be followed by Michelle, who will tell you a bit more about GivingData, and then Allison will speak about Hilton's motivations for e-reporting, a bit about their experiences and approach to e-reporting, and then do an actual demo of how e-reporting works in GivingData. We're going to try to keep our speaking portion short, so we have plenty of time for your questions and answers. We'll take those at the end, but if you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to submit them in the question box. And then I did also want to mention, since it's always asked, that we will make a recording of this webinar available. So, what is e-reporting? E-reporting is basically just a way for you to share your grants data with Foundation Center directly, typically through an Excel spreadsheet. And this program exists for two reasons. One, to improve the timeliness of the data that we have about Foundation's grant making, and two, to improve the quality of the data that we have. So as some of you might know, most of Foundation Center's data comes from the 990, but as you all know, that data is quite old. By the time you file your 990 at the end of your fiscal year, and then the IRS processes it and posts it, it might be more than a year that's gone by, which means that the sector is really relying on outdated information for its decision making. And then in terms of quality, the 990 is really more of a compliance document than a communications tool. And so the level of detail provided is typically not very good. So, you know, we might know that a foundation or that a grant was made for health, but it'd be much more helpful for other funders and others to know that it was specifically meant to improve tuberculosis control in China, for example. In terms of the how, obviously, Allison is going to be doing a demo, so I won't say too much about this, but just to briefly explain that all it entails is generating a report and exporting it, reviewing it to make sure that the data is appearing how you'd like it to, and then submitting it to egrants@foundationcenter.org, which, by the way, is also where you can contact us at any time with any questions. And you can submit data with whatever frequency you'd like, whether it's monthly, quarterly. All we ask is that we submit it annually. As for what data to share, there's only 8 required fields. And as you can see, half of them have to do with the recipient, another 3 with the timing and amount of funding provided, and the last is a grant description. And in a bit, I'll touch on why a good grant description is so important. And so while you can submit data to us with just those required fields, you do have the option of providing additional information, which can help you exert more control over how your data appears in our products and tools. So those additional fields, I've grouped them into 3 main categories. The first bucket are fields that help us ensure that we're talking about the right grant or the right recipient. So for example, transaction ID, which is the grant ID that you might have in your system. If you ever need to make an update, that way we can easily know which grant in our records we specifically need to update. Similarly, for the recipient, if you have an EIN or a specific address, that could also help us match it exactly to the right recipient in our database. Then you can provide additional grant details, basically things like a grant title, program area, grant duration, or start and end dates. And I noticed that a few community foundations had signed up to this webinar as well, so just wanted to point out that for community foundations, we also recommend sharing the fund name and the fund type or subtype, like donor advised fund, for example. And finally, there's fields that assist us with coding your grants properly. So once we receive your information, we code it according to our taxonomy, which covers these 5 facets. And if you don't provide this coding, and I did want to mention that this can be your own coding. You don't necessarily have to use our taxonomy, though we do have a taxonomy that anyone is free to use. So we will try to extract this coding from the grant description or other information you provide, such as what we know about the recipient being funded. So here is an example of how this grant information appears in our products, in this case, Foundation Maps. And you can see how the additional details provided or the detailed description help us extract information on the subject, daycare, in our case we call it childcare, which also lets us extrapolate the population served, and there's a bit about that in the grant description as well as the geo area served. And I did also, I was telling Allison that I couldn't choose between 2 grant descriptions, so decided to share them both. I just wanted to point out, or I find this a wonderfully detailed grant description, because I can just imagine that if you're a funder funding work on multiple sclerosis, having this level of detail about what exactly this grant involves could help you coordinate your own grant making better, or you know, reach out to the Hilton Foundation if that's something you were interested in as well. So that's a bit about the what of eReporting, and now I just want to talk about the why a bit. So we say there's 4 main benefits to eReporting. The first is that you know your grant making best. So by eReporting, you're helping us tell the story of your grant making in the most accurate and best way possible. Second, like I said, you're helping us ensure that the field has the best data possible on which to base its decisions, whether in terms of finding other funders to collaborate with or making decisions about where or what to fund. Third, you also get a free communications tool in the form of an interactive eReporter map, which displays the data you've shared with us. And here's just a couple of screenshots about what those maps look like. The first screenshot shows the grants displayed by recipient location, and the screenshot below shows grants by geo area served. And then there's also list views and other ways that you could interact with this data. And then finally, the 4th reason is that you can save yourself time. As you'll see in the next slide, the data that you share with us makes it to many different knowledge products that are meant to benefit the sector. So by sharing the data with us, you can minimize the request for information you receive to populate those types of tools. So in terms of where your data ends up, in addition to appearing on your free eReporter map, this data also appears in our 2 main subscription products, Foundation Directory Online and Foundation Maps, which I should mention are also freely available to the public at more than 400 Foundation Center partner locations throughout the US and several other countries. It will also appear in other Foundation Center knowledge products, such as these foundation landscapes. And these landscapes, which are publicly available, capture the data we have on a given subject or location. And so in essence, they're a different slice of our database packaged to present only the data that is relevant to a particular community. So just wanted to share that so that you know what's happening with your data once we get it. So that's it for my overview about eReporting. So I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to tell you a bit more about GivingData.
Thanks, Laya, and apologies to everyone. I'm getting over a cold, so there may be a little bit of coughing during this portion. So for those of you that are not familiar with GivingData, we are a full grants management system, and we are comprised of not only software developers, but also former foundation employees. So we've definitely been on your side of the table having to report to the Foundation Center, and we definitely support eReporting for the Foundation Center, not only as a software company, but we definitely understand the value of data in terms of communicating all the great work that you do at the Foundation, but also inform ongoing grant-making strategies at your organization. And I won't go too deep into the hows because Allison's going to show you here in a minute, but we have on our website, we have a video tutorial for performing the eGrant reporting to the Foundation Center. If you go to our website, GivingData.com, you can see the video there. And then also Allison will be showing you how she does it from the Hilton Foundation perspective. So I think we'll have a Q&A at the end, but I'd like to introduce Allison. She's the Director of Grants Management and Knowledge Management at the Hilton Foundation. She's been there for about 3.5, almost 4 years now. And we did some work with their organization to some pre-work aligning their coding internally with the Foundation Center taxonomy, as well as preparing the data dump for the Foundation Center. So with that, I'll turn it over to Allison.
Great, thank you. And this is the part that makes me nervous of showing my screen, whether you're going to be seeing my desktop or GivingData.
We're seeing your desktop.
Okay, let's change it here. And now, do you see GivingData?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Now, okay, that was the part I was the most nervous about. Hello, everyone. So I will quickly, I will show the demo, but I also wanted to, as I do it, talk through a little bit about why the Hilton Foundation reports to the Foundation Center and sort of the mechanics of how we do it as well. So this is our live database. Please don't, well, it's fine. So there are two ways that I can do this in the system very easily. The most that probably everybody is the most familiar with is just a saved search, which I have created because we report to the Foundation Center on a quarterly basis. So at the close of each quarter, I run this report, and I'm sure because everyone is watching, it's going to decide to be slow. And this shows me the 285 grants that the Hilton Foundation approved in the previous quarter. So what you're looking at is the end of last year. And this has already formatted for me, in the way that our saved searches can do this, all of the data points that we send to the Foundation Center. So I know Laya talked about the 8 that are required. So in addition to the required ones, we do send the transaction ID, we send the project start and end date, and then in terms of coding, we send to the Foundation Center the program area coding, the geographic area served, and the type of support that the grant is providing. So, you know, this is here's the starting point that we had. If I had left something off, I could edit any of the columns or switch something around. If I had country in the wrong place, I would simply just slide it down or move it back and then update the search. Also, if I only wanted to if I wanted to change the criteria, I could go back and do that as well. And then one of the things I wanted to talk about is, in addition, as a grants manager, one of the things that I am obsessed with is the data integrity and making sure that we're consistent and complete across the database. And this is actually a really good quarterly check-in for me and my team to look at what is going on. So usually before I do the export, which I will show you, I take a minute just to make sure, are there any empty fields? So looking in here, I'm able to sort the data, and I can see these tax ID fields are empty. As I look through, it's because these are our international grants, or we have some grants to for-profit organizations where we didn't collect the EIN. So that's a check that I can do. I can also go through and make sure that if a state is missing or something just looks funny, I can go back and clean it up. I also, so that's sort of the before I export it, I just make sure that, all of the websites start with HTTP because that's our style guide, or, that's our data integrity guide. I know the coding is complete because it's required for approval, but this is the set fields that we have. The other way I can show you, if I wanted to, let me just duplicate this really quickly. I can also run this exact same search from a dashboard where I would just simply say, and for ease of demonstration purposes, I'm just going to show it for all of the last year. And then I could click into here, get that same list view, and edit the columns. These are out of order. It's mostly set. Edit the columns, and then I could export it here as well. So I just wanted to show that I do have two different ways that I could do this. So then it's a very simple export, which is probably going to open up on my other screen. So let's give it a second. Because one of the things I wanted to talk about is that we also take a little bit of time here to align. I'm going to bring it back over. Are you seeing it? Can somebody tell me?
Yes.
Okay. I think for probably lots of organizations, there's the things that you track internally and then the things that you share externally. And so some of our descriptions, and Laya talked about the importance of the project description or the grant description. Some of our descriptions, I picked one exactly, will have a little bit of personal information about the grant. So to be clear, we send every grant that we make to the Foundation Center as part of eReporting. So that includes our discretionary and matching grants that might be made by staff. And so we want to make sure that, and our board, we want to make sure that we've stripped out all of that personal information. So I do some data management within the spreadsheet as well. One of the other places that I need to do this, and this is my plug for the Foundation Center taxonomy, is that for program area, or as part, we like to report that to the Foundation Center, but our own internal program areas are a part of our coding system that we haven't updated in quite a while. And so there are some things in here that make no sense external to the Foundation. One of them being, for instance, miscellaneous. What does this mean? So I come back, so I go through here and make sure that we're not sending anything miscellaneous to the Foundation Center where they have to figure it out or make a best guess. I use their taxonomy to say, oh, that was Best Friends Animal Society, that's animal welfare. And so I'll manually change it. I am, on my list of things to do is align our program area taxonomy with the Foundation Center, but I haven't gotten there yet. Where I did get there, and maybe, Laya, if we can switch back to the PowerPoint at this point, and I can, if there are questions at the end, I'm more than happy to go back to showing the demo. I know it's a short demo, but it's pretty easy. But with the slides, I just wanted to talk a little bit through when we transitioned to GivingData. One of the things that we worked with them was to think about our coding as it related to external communications. And so you're seeing here on the left where it says Hilton type of support, that used to be the different codes that we used. And so it was actually Michelle and I worked with a subset of our program team to take a look at what we were doing, which in a lot of 90, I would say 85%, I think when we ran the numbers, 85% of our grants were being coded to programs, which was not descriptive or indicative, frankly, of what the various types of support that our grants were providing. So on the next slide, you can see where, on the next slide, you can see where we did alignment with what we were already doing and where that aligned with what the Foundation Center, how they were describing things. And so those were natural maps over, and we just said those are easy to deal with. And then on the subsequent slide, we figured out how to deal with these other codes that we were using in order to transfer them to the Foundation Center support strategy. And so I think we have one more slide that shows how we did that. I'm not totally sure, I can't remember. Yes, so you can see that we did that, and we adopted this taxonomy, I believe, at the beginning of 2016. And so we've been, it's had two benefits. One, the data that we're giving to the Foundation Center as part of eReporting is richer and more indicative from what we're saying that we're doing. And also internally, we just have a much better sense of what types of support our grants are providing. So I think the last couple of things, I talked a little bit about and why we do this quarterly. And Maya touched on this as well. Part of the reason we do this is at the Hilton Foundation overall, we try to be as transparent as we can about the work that we're doing. And we feel that reporting the grants in relatively often, quarterly feels relatively often, we're being consistent with that value of transparency. And as I said, it also has helped us take control of our messaging. We can be much more specific and concrete. And when we give that information, that's the information that the Foundation Center uses. And so we have just a more influence on how things look externally, because we all work, we know that there's nuance behind what we're doing. And sometimes while it feels a little bit scary to just clamp it into one item or one thing, eReporting lets you shape it and to how you would like to see it reported externally. So I think that is what I have. But I'm happy to go back and answer any questions, show anything again.
Thanks, Allison. And so we'll be turning to the audience for questions in just a minute. So if you have questions, please feel free to submit them. I just want to show one more slide, which is where you can find additional information about some of the things we talked about. So here you can find more information about our eReporting program. On this page is also where you'll find our template. We've talked about the taxonomy throughout the webinar. You can find our philanthropy classification system here at taxonomy.foundationcenter.org, and you can actually export a list of the entire taxonomy with the definitions if you'd like. We also have a software partners page where we list the various organizations, grants management software providers that we're partnering with for the eReporting program. And as you can see here, we provided links to the instructions for how to eReport. And this is also where we'll be putting up a recording of this webinar. And then finally, if you're interested in taking a look at some of the landscapes where your information might appear, like SDG funders or WASH funders, for example, this is where you can find links to a few of those. So that is all we have in terms of presenting about eReporting and how you do it. So at this point, turn over to your questions. And we have one question from Catherine, and the question is, you stated that one of the benefits was the eReporter map. What level of access to data do we get with that map? So that map basically includes all the data that you submit to us through the eReporting program. And so it would have, actually, let me see if I can pull up a sample and walk you through it. So here's an example of the eReporting map. The default view is the list of recipients, the distribution of grants by recipients. You could also see the distribution by area served. And you can also, and if you click on a country, for example, you'd get the summary of the grants made in that country. And you can also access this information in a list view. So you'd have the recipients, which would let you see, who the top recipients are, and the summary of their grants. And then here you could actually get down to the individual grant details. I'm just trying to move things out of the way. So for example, you would get the details of your grants. Your free eReporter map does only include the data on your organization. And the idea here is that you could use this, like I said, as a communications tool to share with board members. You could embed it on your website, which we're also happy to provide instructions for. And if you've submitted data to us in the past and don't have your free, don't have a link to your map, feel free to email us and we can send that over. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, I hope you all, oh, I spoke too soon. Nope, just a thank you. And that's what I wanted to do as well, to thank you all for your interest in learning more about eReporting. I hope this was helpful in terms of understanding why this might be beneficial to your organization and to the sector at large, and also gives you a sense of how you might actually do it for your organization. If you have any questions, like I said, you can submit questions to egrants@foundationcenter.org. We'll also be sending a follow-up email with a link to this webinar recording and additional information. So thank you also to Michelle and Allison for joining me today and presenting with me today. Any last thoughts that you all want to mention before we close?
This is Allison, and I will just say, when I started at the Hilton Foundation, the reporting had been a little bit inconsistent, and so I think it's easy. Know that it's really easy to just get started. You just have to get started, and the team at the Foundation Center is very eager to help you do it and to figure out where you are, if you've ever reported before, or how far back to go. So, I know sometimes just getting started can feel like a lot, but just get started, just try it. That would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Allison. Great message. We also encourage people to just start with what you can, and over time you can obviously improve or expand on what you send over. But I think getting started is an important step. And then Michelle, anything you'd like to share?
Not much, just that to echo Allison's point, it can feel like a lot to start, but once you get started, you'll find that it moves pretty smoothly. At least that's sort of what we found when we did this work at her organization. Also, we will be at Peak Grantmaking next week, so if any of you have any other questions, you can actually meet the GivingData team in person, and we are happy to talk through some of our offerings and see this in a demo in person.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining today, and look forward to hearing from you. Bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye.